Hey everybody, welcome back to OMG the Cloud. In this episode, we're going to step through the basic configuration in Home Assistant. Now, in our previous episode, we went ahead and did the deployment from a VMDK file straight from the Home Assistant GitLab repo. And once that was set up, it's time to go ahead and do the base configuration. What we have on the screen here is what you're presented with for the first time setup with Home Assistant. One thing I'd like to point out before we enter anything else is if you were doing a restore, say your Home Assistant blew up and you want to restore it from backups, well, Home Assistant does its own backups and snapshots inside the virtual machine. So you can always grab one of those snapshots, and right here at the bottom, you have this option to restore from a previous snapshot. This is going to open up a file dialog and prompt you for that backup. You would just apply that and get you back and running. Pretty handy. But that's not the case here. We're doing a fresh install. So step through this wizard, go ahead and set up an account for you, something that makes sense for yourself. Next, you're going to want to define where your Home Assistant is physically located. Now, there's a lot of really good stuff in here that is definitely location based. So you can use some really good geofencing functions that I think you'll find really handy, especially in the context of home automation. If you want to have certain things happen when you get close to your home, or make sure your garage door is closed when you and everybody else in your home has left, or at least send you a notification that it was left open. That'd be nice. So go ahead and pop in like a meaningful location for your home, and then you can set your location in your time zone and also your units of measurement. So if you're in the United States or somewhere where you use imperial units, go ahead and make sure you set that. Your time zone as well. If you hit detect on here, it's going to pull your approximate location based on the public IP of your home internet connection. So that'll get you in the neighborhood, and then you can zoom in and set your actual location. And it also picks up the time zone, so that's handy as well. And then your elevation, which is in meters, regardless of whether or not you're using imperial units. So go ahead and look up the elevation of where your home is and set that here. Next up is the information sharing page here. So if you're comfortable with sharing any of these data bits, it's really helpful for Home Assistant and the community and the broader community of plugin and add-on manufacturers to get some of that usage data. So if you're comfortable sharing some of that data, you can go ahead and check mark some of these and then hit next. And next we've got our list of integrations. This is a pretty extensive list. Go ahead and just scroll through here and take a look at the type of integrations that are available right out of the box in Home Assistant. Now, each one of these is going to have its own configuration points that you need to do, but most of them are pretty straightforward. We're going to step through a couple of them today. For now, we're going to go ahead and just hit finish, and this will take us to our main dashboard. One of the first things we're going to want to do is get some add-ons in here. Now, we've talked about ESPhome. Why don't we go ahead and get that loaded up? So if we go over to our supervisor tab on the left column here, and then at the top hit add-on store, this is again where all those integrations are, the official add-ons. So hit search, do ESPhome, it'll come up on that list. Go ahead and click on that guy, and this will take us to the main page for ESPhome. Click install, and once it's done installing, let's turn on a couple of these features here. Let's turn on the watchdog, make sure if the service were to crash, it'll restart it, and then show in sidebar. When I click this, you'll see we now have an ESPhome button in the left-hand navigation. You're gonna be going to this tab a lot. I recommend turning that on. Hit start, and the service starts up pretty quickly. Now, to get to its configuration, if you hit the Open Web UI, it'll take us to our main page for ESPhome. So, what are we going to be using ESPhome for? Well, this is where we're going to do our configurations for our IoT sensors. So your ESP32, your ESP8266, you'll do all of your programming for those in here. What you'll need to do is just a one-time download of the bin file to your local machine, because you need something to flash to that ESP to start with. You'll flash that over USB, and once it's on your network, from there, it's completely over the air. All of your updates are done wirelessly, and those nodes will appear in here. We're going to go through that in a separate video because that's an entire session on its own for sure. In short, you're just going to hit the plus button here. This is going to take you through a basic wizard asking you for the node name, device type, Wi-Fi information, things like that. And you'll compile that, you'll download it, you'll flash it, and be off and run it. But don't worry, we're going to cover that separately. So let's skip that for now. Let's go back to our add-ons. We'll go back to Supervisor and Add-on Store. Let's load up another one that we're going to use quite a bit too, and that's going to be Mqtt. So we want a Mqtt broker. If you click on that and again install and enable the watchdog and hit start. Okay. Mqtt up and running. An Mqtt broker is another integral piece of IoT work. It's a purpose-built protocol that's really designed for these types of sensors. It's just really low power, low latency, and very efficient protocol. So you'll see this a lot if you're not already familiar with it. If you are, awesome. You know exactly what Mqtt is for, and you know why we're installing it. Next, let's go back to Supervisor and our add-on store, and let's install the Samba share. So you'll find this one here partway down. Sometimes you need to be able to drop a file into your Home Assistant, and this is a great way to have just a really easily exposed SMB share that if you're on Windows, you can drop it in easily. If you're on Mac, you can drop it in easily. It makes it easier to pass files into your Home Assistant. You want to enable that watchdog. For this one, we need to do some configuration first. So on the top, go to the Configuration tab, and you'll see we have some configuration points for the share. One thing that is critical is the password. Hit save and go back to the Info tab, Start, and the service starts right up. So keep an eye out for that password field if you're having trouble getting this to start. One other thing we should cover real quick is you want to turn on advanced mode for your user profile. When advanced mode is off, you don't see some of the add-ons. Just click on your name in the lower left, scroll down and go to advanced mode. Go ahead and turn that slider on. And now if we go back to Supervisor, Add-on Store, we're looking for Terminal. Let's install this first one, Terminal and SSH. Click Install. There's definitely times you need to be able to SSH into your Home Assistant instance. And while you can get into it via a more traditional SSH method, it's a lot more convenient to be able to have access to that straight through a browser. So once you have that installed, as we've done before, go ahead and turn on the watchdog. Auto update is always good as well. And again, show that in the sidebar. We're going to be using that quite a bit. And click Start, and it's up and running. And on the left side, if we click on Terminal, look at that. We have a terminal session straight into our Home Assistant instance. As far as add-ons go, that's going to put us in a pretty good spot for a good baseline configuration. So let's go look at a couple of the other things that are part of the core components of it. Go back to Supervisor. Let's go to the Snapshots tab on the top row. Now I mentioned this briefly when we started up the initial configuration that you could restore from a snapshot. So this is where you would generate that snapshot. You can come in here and just create a new snapshot, give it a password if you like. You'll see that appear down below to see the details of it, and you can restore directly from here if you needed to, but you can also download that snapshot. That's going to pull that down to your local system. You can store those so that you can restore your entire config if something disastrous were to happen and you didn't have another method to restore from. Very, very handy. Next, let's jump to the System tab. This is going to give you some stats on what's happening as far as your CPU and memory utilization and let you know what version you're on. This is also where if you wanted to change the default host name, it just defaults to Home Assistant. You can go ahead and change that if you wanted something a little bit more meaningful. And then you have the IP that the machine is running on. You can change this in here to do static and DHCP. I really recommend you manage this at the network level. If you're running pfSense, you know I love pfSense. I recommend you just make a static reservation for the MAC address of this virtual machine and just leave it that way. I think that's a better way to run it, but you certainly can come in here and set it if you like. We can also do updates to the system itself from here as well. Back on the dashboard page, we'll see I happen to have a pending update here. I can click update here. It'll go through its process. It'll restart the virtual machine and all the containers that are inside of it. It's also worth noting all of the components of Home Assistant are containers. We talk a lot about containers in this channel. Even though we didn't directly containerize Home Assistant, which you can do, Home Assistant is still running as containers. So it's just in a different place. It's all good. I'm gonna go ahead and hit update here. It does prompt you to make a snapshot before you do the backup. We'll let it do that and we'll let it run its update process. Okay guys, that's gonna do it for today. Just wanted to get you guys set up with a basic Home Assistant configuration, a few add-ons plugged in there, and a few utilities that'll make life a lot easier once you start having to work with the file system and having to work with terminal inside there. We're going to continue to step through this in our next series. Thanks so much for watching today. If you found this valuable, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you catch me on the next one, and I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.